mentioned, I'm Dr. Narelle Dybing. I work at the National Feral Pig Action Plan, and I'm going to talk about some feral pig parasites and what's hidden within. So I thought I'd first introduce the topic of feral pigs. And one thing that some people may or may not know is that it's estimated that in Australia, there is about 24 million feral pigs, which is quite a lot. And we know that they cause a lot of impacts into the agriculture, environmental, cultural, and social assets in Australia. So what do we know? They cost Australian agriculture more than $100 million a year. And in different areas, they'll obviously have different impacts. And this is through destroying crops and pastures, spreading weeds and disease, and potentially preying on livestock as well. So we'll quickly go into some of the threats. So while feral pigs are a very real threat to the Australian pork industry, particularly in relation to transmission of African swine fever, for which there's no cure, as well as other exotic and endemic diseases, they can cause significant losses to other agricultural sectors, including sheep, beef, horticulture, sugar, bananas, cotton, grain industries, as well as the infrastructure associated with these enterprises. So they're known to carry some agricultural diseases, such as Panama disease in the banana industry and Phytophthora cinnamomi, which is dieback. And given they like to bulldoze, so you can see here they do like to bulldoze and go through the different pastures and crops. So this therefore increases likelihood of it spreading some of these diseases. And you can also see that the interface between feral pigs and livestock such as beef is a bit blurred. They don't really care fences or anything like that. So there's quite a lot of threats there. And then they've also got some damage to environmental assets. So they can destroy native animal nesting sites, such as the turtle nesting sites. They can also predate on these nests and the threatened species. They damage habitats and food sources by wallowing and destroying the water quality and degrading wetlands. They can also present within culturally significant areas. They cause land degradation and erosion and damage vegetation. And some of this damage can also be the costs. So like I mentioned before, to the agricultural industry itself, but also the cost of control, as well as vaccines to help protect livestock, which is some unquantified values. So if these livestock weren't in contact with feral pigs, or feral pigs weren't there, that is a cost that farmers would not have to really worry about. There are also impacts to land managers. So it's quite mentally straining to try and deal and manage feral pigs. So this can be overwhelming due to time, effort, given they've already got so much to do, and the cost to maintain this constant pressure, because they are a constant issue. So with this, it's exacerbated in times of drought and other climatic events as well. And it's also trying to keep land managers engaged and actively involved in managing the pests. So the environment they're working is also very challenging to deal with. So they have everything else all piled together, which creates this big issue. So knowing all these impacts, there's a survey went out to stakeholders to try and find out what impacts they were feeling, as well as what they thought might be the most significant to them. So what we found was that biosecurity threat and disease transmission was one of the top impacts reported by land managers, which had a 441 respondents, which is quite big nationally. So let's have a look a little bit closer into this biosecurity risk. So they can harbour and transmit over 30 exotic, endemic and zoonotic pathogens of major concern to livestock, plants and humans, as well as 37 different types of parasites. And these can also negatively impact native wildlife, including threatened and endangered species. And so wild and feral pig populations can carry diseases that threaten the health of the commercial pig industry. And this has actually been a key focus of global veterinary authorities so that they can develop and implement biosecurity interventions to manage these risks. So some of the things which are most notable, including, again, African swine fever, and you may have heard of such things as Q fever, Lyme-like diseases such as Borrelia, foot and mouth disease, swine vesicular disease, trichinosis, leptospirosis, brucellosis. This is just a very short list. But now that we think about these biosecurity risks, who are these biosecurity risks impacting on? So there is a whole wide range of communities involved that might be impacted, whether it is farmers, Indigenous communities in the remote areas of Australia. There's a high risk to public health. Also, pest management contractors, land managers, and most farmers, they have to deal with feral pigs every day. They also impact on agriculture and environment biodiversity. And something else that some people kind of forget about is also our pets, so dogs, including pig dogs who might have a higher overlap with feral pigs than other pets as well. So knowing all these impacts, the first national coordinated strategy for feral pigs was implemented. So this is a National Feral Pig Action Plan. So it's a long-term 10-year plan, and it is a community-led plan. So we know that they have such a high reproductive ability that in order to control feral pigs, an annual knockdown rate of at least 70% has to suppress the growth potential of the population. So that's quite high, and this can't be done by just one person. So therefore, group control actually gives a far greater impact on the target species than individual uncoordinated efforts. So this plan helps to coordinate and collaborate these management plans and align local and regional management plans as well. And we know that the responsibility, control activity and costs has to be shared across the community because it's not just one person's problem. So therefore, everyone is required to play their part, including private and public land managers alike, in order to manage a specific pest or disease. Okay, we also, this plan is aiming to improve the effectiveness of management activities through the delivery of new approaches, resources, data management and systems, and also to increase stakeholder knowledge and skills to consistently apply adaptive management methods in accordance with standard operating procedures and keep welfare at the forefront of everyone's mind. So therefore, the vision of the plan is to actively suppress or eradicate, where feasible, feral pig populations to reduce these impacts. And this is via 3 strategic goals: by effective leadership and coordinated partnerships and strong governance, engaging with the community and helping to educate impacts and risks and the best practice management activities, and to increase the adoption of these methods and systems by land managers. So let's get into the nitty-gritty. One of the ones that everyone's kind of heard about recently in the news and is quite major in Australia is the Japanese encephalitis virus. So it's a mosquito-borne viral disease which causes reproductive losses and encephalitis in susceptible species. Pigs, both domestic and feral, are amplifiers of the virus, which means they can be infected with this virus, whether or not they show symptoms, and they can keep it in the environment until a mosquito bites them and gets infected themselves and therefore transmits it onto other susceptible species. So this is maintained by the pigs, but also by water birds in the environment. And as of 13th of May, 35 feral pigs in the Northern Territory have been confirmed with Japanese encephalitis virus, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that's not just in one area, that's over 5 different local government areas. So given the issues of feral pigs, I think it highlights just how important biosecurity is. Couple of notes: it can't be directly transmitted from person to person or by pig to pig. It needs that mosquito vector. So keeping that at bay is quite important as well, and keeping mosquito breeding grounds away from important areas is also quite important. And highlighting pork is safe to eat. You can't get it from eating pork. Okay, it is safe to eat. And also another note is that it can actually cost industry quite a lot of money. So per 100 sows, it costs $40,000 to the producers. So it is quite impactful. And to the nitty-gritty of the parasites. So like I mentioned, they can carry quite a lot of parasites, but we're only going to talk about some of these because we don't have enough time to go through every single thing. But we know that they contribute to the introduction, reintroduction, and maintenance of these diseases, including endemic as well as transboundary diseases. And these can affect livestock, plants, and humans. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into each of these and talk about who they affect, who they impact, and how. So the large roundworm Ascarisum is found in the small intestines of pigs and can grow up to 40 centimetres long. And some heavily infested pigs can have up to 250 worms blocking their small intestines, as well as their bile ducts. So this can actually cause a loss of appetite, vomiting, poor feed efficiency, and slow growth, which can therefore cause economic issues or impacts to the producers. And the larvae actually migrate through the liver, so it can cause a lot of liver issues as well, and potentially eventually death. Something really interesting to note is that the female can produce more than 300,000 eggs per day, which is passed through the feces, and these eggs can survive in the environment for many years. Some have found viable eggs of over 10 years in the environment. So you've got to be really careful and make sure hygiene is very, very important. So wash your hands if you handle or clean pigs, if you're dealing with feral pigs. Before you eat fruit and vegetables, make sure you wash them properly and things like that. So that's Ascarisum. They also have a greater ability than most to harbour and excrete important waterborne zoonotic pathogens. So the ones I'm going to focus on are Cryptosporidium, Giardia, Balantidium, and Entamoeba. This is because they forage and wallow in waterways, and this can increase the turbidity of water, but it can actually increase therefore the transmission of these parasites, because they can excrete these parasites near the waterways or in the waterways, and they can therefore become infectious to other organisms. And most mammals can be infected with most of these. Obviously, it depends on what strain they are, but a lot of the ones that feral pigs carry have a zoonotic potential. So we really need to make sure we protect waters from these feral pigs, as well as making sure if we swim in and around areas, make sure you keep safe, okay? Because this can cause diarrhea, abdominal pain, lethargy. All right, so now we're going to go to parasites in the muscles. Spirometra ACA europaea is causing the disease sparginosis in humans and animals. The main hosts are actually dogs, cats, foxes, and dingoes. And in the waterways, a freshwater copepod or a little crustacean can get infected with it. And the next host, which is the intermediate host, which is small mammals, which includes pigs, reptiles, amphibians, and birds, ingest it and become sick. And then therefore the next host ingests the intermediate host. So humans can get sick via uncooked or raw meat, and so ingesting that, or by swimming in the lakes where this little crustacean is swimming around, okay, and making sure we don't ingest that parasite, which might be really hard because you can't see them. So you've got to always be really careful, but this can cause neurological issues such as weakness, headaches, and seizure. Another parasite in the muscle is Toxoplasma gondii, which some people may have heard of, the crazy cat lady disease. Again, it can infect a large number of animals, and the main hosts are domestic and feral cats. And you'll hear a bit more about Toxo in the next talk by Louis. And there's this thing called parotenic hosts. So they're not required in a life cycle. However, they pick up the infected oocysts in the environment, and we can actually then ingest this parasite in the muscles of pigs, sheep, and livestock, and then that's how we can actually get sick, or by not washing vegetables properly and ingesting the parasites from contaminated water. This is also the one that you may have heard about when people, pregnant ladies should not be handling kitty litter because of the oocysts in the feces, because there is a big important factor of congenital transmission. So usually humans or adults have a high immune system, so we can kind of fight usually these the disease by toxo. However, if your immune system's low or if it's neonatal, unfortunately, it can cause quite a lot of issues, including hydrocephalus, which is fluid in the brain, can cause blindness. But usually, they won't really cause too many issues unless there's that low immunity. Right, next, the pork tapeworm of Taenia solium. So it's endemic in many Southeast Asian countries, and it is actually extending its range. But usually it's found, it's not normally found in Australia. However, in travellers who have gone overseas can pick that up and bring that in. But we don't really think it's going to establish in Australia. It's not likely to establish due to the complicated nature. However, our sanitation is also pretty high, so that can usually preclude establishment of this life cycle. The condemnation of carcasses is quite an important one with this parasite. So the pork industry can be affected if this one did happen to make its way into the pork industry. However, we don't know the infection rate in feral pigs in Australia. So we're hoping it's quite low. But again, if that sanitation is upheld, which it usually is here, that should preclude too much issues here. In the liver, there's a parasite called the liver fluke, which is Fasciola hepatica. So it's one of the most abundant and damaging helminth parasites of grazing ruminants, so sheep, goats, and cattle. And in some endemic regions, 100% of the animals can be affected. And it can be particularly harmful or even fatal for sheep and lambs. Pigs can pick that up by getting the infective larvae, which has insisted onto grass on the outskirts of little water bodies, and can therefore become infected and can keep that therefore in the environment and keep the livestock actually, keep the parasite in the environment. So therefore that livestock are most likely to pick it up because it is highly prevalent in that environment. So humans can also get infected with this parasite via ingesting the infective larvae, which is insisted on that grass, or ingesting the larval stage in the water sources itself as well. So at the moment, it's present in Eastern Australia. To my knowledge, it's not in Western Australia, and they are trying to keep it that way. However, it's only a matter of time, but hopefully if we can keep, again, our biosecurity quite high, hopefully we can restrict that. High-dated disease, which is caused by the parasite Echinococcus granulosus. So wild dogs and domestic dogs, dingoes are the main definitive hosts, which carries the adult stage. And intermediate hosts can be any non-carnivorous mammals. So can be sheep, can also be feral pigs. And humans can also get infected with this parasite again. So we can only get infected by ingesting an embryonated egg from the environment. We don't get infected by ingesting the meat itself or the offal that has the high-dated cyst. However, that is how the wild dogs get infected, and therefore, again, keep this cycle in the environment and keep the parasite in the environment. So they get it by ingesting offal from offal pits and farms, or from animals that are infected. And the high-dated cyst can actually go to a number of organ systems, including liver, lung, brain, etc. And this can lead to a lot of production losses and carcass condemnation. And again, we don't know the exact role of feral pigs in the transmission, but we do know that they can carry it, and they are known to transmit that. So now ectoparasites. So there are some mites, including Hematopenis suis. Some studies have found over 99% of feral pigs in their samples were infected with this louse. And this usually provides a mild irritation and scratching, but heavy infestations can occur and can also affect productivity. One that everyone's probably heard about is Sarcoptes scabies, or causing mange. So feral pigs can, again, keep that present in the environment. And we know this parasite can affect wombats and other wildlife. Whether it's the same variant, we're not too sure. However, it is something that really needs to be investigated. And it is the most important of the mites that feral pigs carry due to the potential to spread to wildlife, pets, and humans. And what you may notice is some trees in the area, if you've got feral pigs, they have these rub marks, and this is how they help to decrease their parasite load, as well as getting a good scratch. And it can cause a large number of secondary infections and can really take a lot out of them, because they can scratch constantly. And some pigs can have thousands to millions of individual mites. And that can cause a big economic significance in livestock, as it can cause morbidity and mortality, as well as decreased fertility. And ticks. So they're known to carry a number of ticks, which is Amblyonna trigotarsum, which can carry rickettsia, which is a spotted fever, and it's also known to transmit Q fever. They also carry Ixodes australiensis. And one tick that I know a picture of, it's called Ornithodorus species of soft ticks. So why this is important is it has been implicated in the transmission of African swine fever, and it plays an important role in Africa. However, we're not too sure if we have the species here, or if the ones that we do have the ability to transmit it in Australia. So, which brings me to quickly the risks of Australia's trade, market access, and industry viability of African swine fever and foot and mouth disease. So both of these at the moment are not present in Australia. However, they're both getting closer to our border. So the Australian pork industry has identified the ASF. An outbreak of ASF will cost at least 2 billion Australian dollars for a large multi-point outbreak. And an outbreak of foot and mouth has been estimated to cost $50 billion to Australian economy. And recently has been confirmed in Indonesia, just on the 6th of May, just last week. So it is definitely something that is of huge concern. But I think if biosecurity is high, and now that we know, we can try and to mitigate those risks. So knowing all of these parasites and all of these life cycles, how do we reduce the risk of transmission? So first of all, reducing the population of feral pigs. I think that's first and foremost. This has helped to break that life cycle and help to reduce the risk of other animals coming into contact with pigs, and therefore coming into contact with their parasites. If you use personal protective equipment when you're in contact with pigs, which is whether you're going out into the bush, dressing carcasses, make sure you cook any meat from feral pigs thoroughly. Don't feed offal from feral pigs to other animals, including your pets. And make sure there's regular and timely livestock and pet parasitic control regimes, because that will really help. There is some drug resistance, obviously, in some, but if you do a regular and you use the correct dosage, make sure that will help to reduce the risk of transmission. And also make sure your hygiene practices are being utilised. This will again help to break that life cycle of the parasite. If you have any questions, there's our contact details there. So Heather Shannon is the Management Coordinator of the National Feral Pig Action Plan, and I'm the Program Support Officer. And you can also go visit our website and subscribe to our newsletter at www.feralpigs.com.au. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much.